was a cold, quiet evening when Sam decided to take a late-night drive. He loved driving at night, away from the rush and chaos of the city. The stars above seemed brighter, and the road stretched endlessly in front of him. Tonight, he had planned to take a longer route through the countryside to clear his mind. He had no idea this drive would be the most terrifying experience of his life. The road was dark and lonely, with only his car headlights lighting the way. Sam turned up the heater and glanced at his dashboard clock. 10:47 p.m. He figured he'd be home by midnight if he kept a steady pace. On the road was soothing at first. Sam relaxed, letting his thoughts drift as the trees on either side of the road blurred past. But as he drove farther, he noticed something strange. The road, which he remembered being well lit in parts, was completely dark. Maybe the streetlights are out, Sam thought, though he couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping in. He reached over to the radio, hoping some music would help. Static greeted him when he turned it on. He switched stations, but they were all the same. Nothing but static. Sam frowned and turned it off. Weird, he muttered, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The road now. He passed no other cars, no houses, no signposts. It was just him, the dark road, and the towering trees. Even his GPS had stopped working a few miles back, showing nothing but a blank screen. Then, he saw something in his rearview mirror. A pair of headlights appeared far behind him, small but growing steadily closer. Sam felt a wave of relief. Another car. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. Too fast. Its headlights grew brighter until they were almost blinding. The vehicle roared up behind him and stayed there, its lights glaring into his rearview mirror. "All right, pass me if you're in such a hurry," Sam muttered. He slowed down slightly, expecting the car to overtake him, but it didn't. It stayed right on his bumper, uncomfortably close. Sam glanced at the rearview mirror again, squinting against the harsh glare. "What's your problem?" he said aloud, even though the driver couldn't hear him. Suddenly, the car swerved violently to the left, then back to the right, as if trying to run him off the road. "Whoa!" Sam shouted, gripping the wheel tightly. His heart pounded as he pressed the gas, trying to put some distance between himself and the lunatic behind him. The other car matched his speed easily, its engine growling like a predator. Licked sweat now. His mind raced. Should he pull over? Try to call for help? He glanced at his phone on the passenger seat. No signal. The other car's headlights blinked off suddenly, plunging the road into darkness. Sam blinked, confused. The car was gone. No headlights, no roaring engine, nothing. It was as if it had disappeared into thin air. He slowed down, his pulse still racing. What the hell was that? He seemed to stretch endlessly, the darkness pressing in on all sides. Sam shook his head, trying to shake off the creeping dread. He drove on for another 20 minutes, his eyes scanning the road nervously. Every shadow seemed to shift, every tree seemed to lean in closer. Then, out of nowhere, he saw a figure standing in the middle of the road. Sam slammed on the brakes, his car screeching to a halt. His heart felt like it would burst out of his chest. The woman, dressed in white. She stood perfectly still, her long hair hanging down over her face. Sam rolled down his window slightly. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman didn't move or respond. Sam hesitated, unsure of what to do. He opened his car door cautiously, stepping out into the chilly night air. Ma'am, he asked, taking a step closer. The woman raised her head slowly, revealing a pale face with hollow dark eyes. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. A chill ran down Sam's spine. Something was very wrong. Before he could react, the woman let out a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the trees. Sam stumbled back, scrambling to get into his car. He slammed the door shut and locked it, his hands shaking as he fumbled for the gear shift. The woman was gone. Sam blinked, his breath coming in short gasps. She had been right there, but now the road was empty. He didn't wait to find out what had happened. He floored the gas pedal, speeding down the road as fast as he could. For the next hour, the road seemed to twist and turn unnaturally, like it was leading him in circles. His gas gauge dipped lower and lower, but there were no gas stations in sight. Then, his headlights flickered. No, Sam muttered, his voice trembling. The lights went out completely. plunging him into darkness. Sam pulled over, his car coasting to a stop. He reached for his phone again, but the screen was dead. "Great," he whispered. "Just great." He sat there in the silence, the weight of the night pressing down on him. He thought about getting out, but something told him to stay inside. Then he heard it, a faint tapping sound on the window. Sam froze. The tapping came again, louder this time. It was coming from the passenger side. Slowly he turned his head. A face was pressed against the glass, pale and expressionless, its dark eyes staring right at him. Sam screamed. Sam's scream echoed in the small cabin of the car as he scrambled to start it again. His fingers fumbled with the key, twisting it desperately. The engine coughed once, twice, and finally roared to life. He didn't wait. Slamming the car into drive, he hit the gas, the tires screeching against the asphalt. The face vanished from the window as the car sped forward, leaving behind only the chilling memory of those empty, lifeless eyes. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, afraid of what he might see. His only thought was to get as far away as possible. For a few minutes, the road seemed normal again, though the eerie silence persisted. Then, his headlights illuminated something on the road ahead. It was a sign, a wooden board nailed to a post, its surface scratched and weathered. "Turn back." Sam's stomach sank. He hadn't seen this sign before. It hadn't been there earlier. He was sure of it. Ignoring the warning, he pressed on. Stopping now wasn't an option. He just wanted to find a gas station, a diner, anything that resembled civilization. But as he drove farther, the surroundings grew even stranger. The trees on either side of the road seemed twisted and malformed, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The air felt heavier, colder, as if it were pressing against him. Then he saw it again. The same woman in white, standing motionless in the middle of the road. Sam slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a halt. "No," he whispered, his voice trembling. "This isn't real. It can't be real." The woman tilted her head, her long hair falling to one side. She raised an arm slowly, pointing directly at him. Sam's breath hitched. His instincts screamed at him to reverse, but when he looked in his rearview mirror, his blood ran cold. The pale face was there again, staring at him from the back seat. He spun around, but the seat was empty. When he turned back to the road, the woman was gone. Sam's hands shook violently as he gripped the wheel. He couldn't take this anymore. He hit the gas, speeding down the road recklessly, his mind racing. The road began to change. It narrowed, the trees closing in, their twisted branches forming an archway overhead. The asphalt cracked and crumbled, turning into rough gravel. Sam's car jolted and bounced as he drove, the headlights flickering weakly. He kept going, his desperation outweighing his fear. Then, the gravel road ended abruptly, leading into a clear. Sam hit the brakes, his car coming to a stop at the edge of a wide open field. In the center of the field stood a dilapidated house, its windows dark and lifeless. He stared at it, his pulse pounding in his ears. The house looked ancient, its wooden walls warped and rotting. Something about it felt wrong, deeply wrong. But as he sat there, unsure of what to do, his car engine sputtered and died. "No, no, no," Sam muttered, turning the key frantically. The engine wouldn't start. The silence, thick and suffocating. Then he heard it, the faint sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. They were coming from behind the car. Sam froze, his breath catching in his throat. The footsteps grew louder, closer. He reached for the door lock, double-checking that it was secure. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror, but all he saw was darkness. Then, the footsteps stopped. A heavy silence filled the air, broken only by the sound of Sam's ragged breathing. Slowly, he turned his head toward the driver's side window. A hand slapped against the glass. Sam screamed, jerking away from the window. The hand was pale, skeletal, its fingers long and claw-like. It dragged down the glass, leaving streaks behind. The car shook violently, as if something was pushing it from all sides. Sam clutched the steering wheel, his mind racing. Then he heard a voice, low and guttural, whispering his name. Sam. It came from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside the car. Sam clamped his hands over his ears, trying to block it out. "Leave me alone," he shouted. The whispering stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. For a moment, Sam thought it was over, but then the passenger door creaked open slowly, even though he was sure he had locked it. A cold, unnatural wind swept through the car, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. Sam turned his head, and his heart stopped. The woman in white was sitting in the passenger seat, her hollow eyes staring straight ahead. Sam couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She turned her head slowly to face him, her lips curling into a twisted smile. "Drive," she whispered. Sam didn't hesitate. He turned the key, and this time, the engine roared to life. He slammed the car into reverse, spinning the wheels as he backed out of the clearing. The woman didn't move, didn't speak again. She just sat there, her empty gaze fixed on him. Sam drove blindly, not caring where he was going as long as it was away from that house. The road seemed to shift and twist around him, the trees blurring into dark shapes. He didn't dare look at the woman again, afraid of what he might see. Finally, after what felt like hours, the road straightened out. The twisted trees gave way to familiar sights, streetlights, houses, signs of civilization. Sam pulled into the first gas station he saw, his hands shaking as he turned off the engine. He looked over at the passenger seat. It was empty. The woman was gone. Sam stumbled out of the car, breathing heavily. The gas station clerk stared at him, wide-eyed. "You okay, man?" the clerk asked. Sam nodded weakly, though he knew he wasn't. He didn't have the words to explain what had just happened. As he stood there, trying to calm his racing heart, he glanced back at his car. There, on the dusty rear windshield, were 2 words scrawled in long, claw-like scratches. "See you." Sam staggered back from his car, his legs weak beneath him. His breathing was shallow, his mind racing. The words scrawled on the rear windshield burned into his thoughts. "See you." The gas station clerk stepped out from behind the counter. "Hey man, are you sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Sam opened his mouth to speak but couldn't find the words. He shook his head, trying to clear it. "I just need gas. Can you fill it up?" His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. The clerk gave him a wary look but nodded. "Yeah, sure, pull it up to the pump." Sam hesitated before getting back into the car. The interior felt suffocating, heavy with the memory of what had just happened, but he had no choice. He slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly as he pulled the car forward. The clerk filled the tank while Sam sat inside, his eyes darting to the mirrors every few seconds. Each shadow seemed to move. Every reflection felt like it held something more. When the clerk window to signal he was done, Sam nearly jumped out of his seat. "You good, man?" the clerk asked again, leaning against the car door. Sam nodded quickly, fumbling for his wallet. "Yeah, just a long drive, thanks." He handed over the cash and didn't wait for change. The clerk watched him with concern as he pulled out of the station and back onto the road. The small burst of relief from reaching civilization didn't last long. The town seemed deserted. Shops were closed, streetlights flickered, and not a single car passed him on the road. Sam gripped the wheel, his knuckles white. His phone still had no signal, and the clock on the dashboard was stuck at 11:59 p.m., no matter how far he drove. He glanced at the gas gauge. Full. At least he wouldn't run out again. As he drove, the scenery began to shift once more. The buildings became sparse, replaced by open fields and distant trees. He didn't remember leaving the town, but now he was back on the empty road again, surrounded by darkness. This isn't," Sam whispered. He had been driving straight, hadn't he? The road stretched on endlessly, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. It was as if the world itself was folding in on him, trapping him in this endless night. The air inside the car grew colder. Sam reached for the heater, cranking it up, but it didn't help. Frost began to form on the inside of the windshield, spreading in delicate, eerie patterns. Then, the whispering started again. "Sam." It was faint at first, barely audible over the hum of the engine, but it grew louder, more insistent, filling the car with a cacophony of voices. "Sam, come back. Sam. Stop it," he shouted, slamming his hands against the steering wheel. The voices fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the rhythmic thrum of the tires on the road. Sam exhaled shakily, gripping the wheel tighter. Then the headlights illuminated something in the distance. It was the same dilapidated house, Sam's stomach churned. No, I left this place. I left. But there it was, standing in the middle of a field, exactly as it had before. The gravel road leading to it was the same, the warped wooden walls unchanged. Sam floored the gas, determined to drive past it. The house disappeared behind him, swallowed by the darkness. But a few minutes later, it was there again. No matter how far he drove, how many turns he made, the house always appeared ahead of him, waiting. Sam's hands trembled as he pulled to a stop in front of it. His chest heaved with uneven breaths. He couldn't outrun it. The air outside the car was still and oppressive. The house loomed in the distance, silent and uninviting. Then the car doors unlocked with an audible click. No, Sam whispered. He hit the lock button, but it didn't respond. The passenger door creaked open on its own. Sam stared in horror as a figure stepped into view. It was the woman in white, her long hair matted and damp, her hollow eyes fixed on him. She didn't move toward him. She just stood there, staring. Then she spoke, her voice low and raspy. "You can't leave." Sam's throat tightened. "What do you want from me?" Her lips curled into that same twisted smile. "Come inside." Sam shook his head vehemently. "No, leave me alone." The woman tilted her head, her expression unchanging. "You already belong to us. You just don't know it yet." The headlights flickering out, darkness enveloped him, broken only by the faint glow of the house in the distance. The woman vanished, leaving behind a chilling silence. Sam sat there, paralyzed, until he heard the faint sound of footsteps again. This time, they came from all around the car. Hands slapped against the windows, leaving smudged prints in the frost. Shadows moved outside, circling him like predators. The voices returned, whispering his name, calling to him. Sam couldn't take it anymore. He threw open the driver's door and ran. The cold night air bit at his skin as he sprinted toward the house. He didn't know why. Maybe he thought it was the only way to end this night. The front door creaked open as he approached, revealing nothing but darkness inside. Sam hesitated at the threshold, his heart pounding. He felt the presence of something behind him, pressing closer. With no other choice, he stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him, plunging him into complete darkness. "Sam!" The voices whispered, louder now, all around him. And then, silence. Sam's car was found abandoned on the side of the road the next morning. No one ever saw him again.